To anyone looking in, Rachel and Marcus Caldwell were the kind of couple people envied. They lived in a polished brick home nestled on a quiet street in suburban Texas, where neighbors waved, lawns were neatly trimmed, and porch lights twinkled with a false sense of security. They had just celebrated their first wedding anniversary, complete with Instagram-worthy photos of champagne flutes, matching robes, and promises to grow old together. But photos lie, and Marcus Caldwell was already aching to escape the frame. He never imagined marriage would feel so suffocating so soon. Rachel, while beautiful and devoted, had a way of drowning him with her perfection. Every dinner was planned, every weekend scheduled. Her laughter, once charming, now grated against his need for freedom. Still, Marcus smiled in every selfie, played the part of the loving husband, and convinced himself the numbness would pass. Then Diane moved in. Rachel's mother, fresh off a painful divorce, arrived with oversized luggage, clinking bottles of red wine, and a confidence that filled every room she entered. She was striking. At 45, she carried herself like a woman who refused to surrender to time. Long brunette hair, sharp cheekbones, and a sarcastic humor that both intimidated and intrigued Marcus. Diane didn't knock on doors. She opened them, walked through like she owned the place. And from the moment she hugged Marcus hello, something shifted in the air. Rachel, ever the doting daughter, welcomed her mother with open arms. She filled the guest room with fresh flowers and candles, unaware that she was also giving her husband and mother the stage for something unspeakable. What began as harmless banter over coffee turned into shared smirks across the dinner table. Then came the late-night talks on the patio when Rachel was asleep. Talks about life, loneliness, and how marriage isn't always what it seems. Marcus never told Diane how often he thought about leaving Rachel, not with words. But she knew. She saw it in his eyes, the way they lingered too long, the way he laughed too easily around her. And Diane? She didn't resist the attention. In fact, she welcomed it. One evening, Marcus stood in the kitchen watching Diane dance barefoot to an old blues record, a glass of wine in one hand, her silk robe swaying. She smiled at him, and something in that moment cracked. Not love, not lust, something darker. A temptation born not just from desire, but from resentment. Resentment of Rachel, of marriage, of the life he felt trapped in. From that moment forward, the lie grew thicker. The picture-perfect marriage began to blur. And as secrets started to simmer beneath the surface, one thing became clear. Someone was going to get hurt. Badly. Diane Montrose was unlike any woman Marcus had ever known. Confident to the point of reckless, unapologetically sensual, and sharp-tongued with just the right amount of sweetness to disarm anyone. She didn't just enter a room, she owned it. And for Marcus, who had felt increasingly emasculated and emotionally invisible in his marriage, Diane was a walking reminder of the thrill he thought he had lost forever. Their connection began with innocent conversations. At least, that's what Marcus told himself. Late at night, when Rachel was upstairs curled beneath flannel sheets, Marcus and Diane would sit on the back patio under a string of golden lights, sipping Merlot and letting the quiet of the Texas night pull their thoughts loose. It started with shared stories about the past. She told him about her crumbled marriage, how her ex-husband cheated with a secretary 20 years younger. Marcus nodded, then talked about how he sometimes felt like he was suffocating in a life that looked perfect on paper. Diane laughed at that, touched his hand, and said, "Don't we all?" The first time her hand lingered a little too long on his shoulder, Marcus said nothing. The second time, when she walked past him in the kitchen, and her robe brushed against his side, open just enough to expose a sliver of thigh, he looked away, not out of guilt, but out of fear of how much he wanted to look. Rachel, ever oblivious, chalked up the tension to Marcus's stress at work. She'd often kiss his forehead and say, "You've been working too hard, baby. I'll make your favorite tonight." But the meal never mattered. He was distracted, lost, torn between the woman he married and the one who haunted his thoughts. The flirtation turned into something unspoken but understood. A glance held too long, a breath shared too closely. One evening, as Diane poured wine into his glass, Her fingers brushed against his for just a second longer than needed. She smirked. Marcus didn't move, didn't blink. And in that electric silence, something between them crossed over from playful to predatory. They never spoke about it. They didn't have to. Diane began wearing silk robes that clung in the right places, her hair down, her perfume thicker. Marcus started coming home earlier, avoiding Rachel's touch. They were orbiting each other closer and closer, until the gravity between them became unbearable. The lines were no longer blurred. They were gone. It wasn't a question of if something would happen. It was just a matter of when. And with each passing day, the risk of discovery increased, like a ticking bomb beneath their roof, waiting for the moment it would finally explode. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same. It began with a kiss. A soft, hesitant, magnetic pull in the quiet shadows of the kitchen, just after midnight. The air smelled like cinnamon and wine, and the only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. Diane didn't ask. Marcus didn't stop her. It just happened, like the moment had been rehearsed in silence for weeks. And once their lips touched, there was no going back. The next morning, nothing was said. Diane made coffee. Marcus shaved and kissed Rachel on the cheek, like he hadn't just betrayed her. But the guilt? It didn't sting the way he expected. If anything, it thrilled him. It made him feel alive. Within days, the affair ignited like dry brush in the Texas heat. They met in hotels outside their suburban bubble, dingy motels with floral bedspreads and hourly rates, where anonymity was currency and shame was optional. Diane wore sunglasses, Marcus used cash, and their rendezvous were a whirlwind of urgency and lust. They laughed at the absurdity of it all, at how easy it was to slip away under Rachel's nose. Text messages became their lifeline. Burner phones hidden in car compartments. Cryptic emojis. Prearranged codes like need more groceries, meaning meet me at the place. And always, always, the rush. The thrill of sneaking around, of sharing a secret so explosive it could destroy 3 lives in a heartbeat. Marcus found himself intoxicated, not just by Diane's body, but by her boldness. She wasn't like Rachel, with her structure and lists, her meal planning and Pinterest boards. Diane was chaos in silk. She didn't ask him about his goals. She didn't care about his gym schedule. She wanted him in the moment, with all the danger and none of the future. Meanwhile, Rachel floated above it all, completely unaware. She beamed about hosting Thanksgiving, showed off her wedding ring to coworkers, and sent group texts with photos of her and Marcus cuddled on the couch. She was happy, trusting, blinded by the belief that love was enough. Sometimes Marcus wondered if Diane cared about Rachel's feelings, her own daughter. But she'd only shrug and say, she'll be fine. She always bounces back. It was sick. It was selfish. And it was unstoppable. What started as a single kiss had become a wildfire. Every time they said it would be the last time, it wasn't. Every promise to stop only made the next meeting hotter, riskier, more consuming. They didn't talk about what would happen if they were caught. They couldn't. Because deep down, they both knew this wasn't love. This was an addiction. A ticking time bomb counting down inside a home built on lies. And once the secret cracked open, it wouldn't just destroy one person. It would destroy everything. At first, Rachel brushed it off. Marcus had been working long hours, and Diane had always been a little flirty. It was just her nature. She didn't want to be the paranoid wife or the overly sensitive daughter. But slowly, like shadows stretching across the walls at dusk, things began to feel off. It was in the little things. The way Diane would suddenly grow quiet when Rachel walked into a room. The quick, loaded glances between Marcus and her mother that lingered too long. The faint scent of Diane's perfume on Marcus's collar one night, not the scent she wore daily, but the deep, musky one she used on special occasions. Rachel didn't say anything. Not yet. But a seed had been planted. Then came the missed calls. Marcus had always been prompt, predictable. But now he was forgetting to answer, claiming his phone died or he was stuck in meetings. When Rachel checked the call log one night, she saw a number she didn't recognize repeated 6 times in one day. She called it. It rang once and went straight to voicemail. A burner. The next morning, she noticed Diane's phone face down on the counter, battery conveniently low, when it never used to be. Rachel's stomach flipped. The silence between them grew heavy, layered in false smiles and tense dinners. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. And then the glance. She caught it during breakfast. Marcus poured coffee, and Diane leaned across the table to hand him the creamer. For just a second, their hands touched and their eyes locked, too knowingly, too intimately. Diane smiled, then looked away. Marcus stared at his plate like it was a lifeline. Rachel's fork paused midair. Everything slowed. In that instant, Rachel saw it all. The pieces clicked. The late-night errands, Diane's sudden obsession with Marcus's workout routine, the private jokes she wasn't part of. The way Marcus always defended her mother, even when Rachel complained about small things like her overstepping boundaries. The strange tension during family game night. The laughter that seemed just a little too charged. Rachel excused herself and went to the bathroom, locking the door behind her. Her reflection stared back at her, blinking, calm, trying not to cry. But her hands trembled. Could it really be true? Her mother, her husband, the people she loved the most, the ones she trusted with everything, were hiding something. And it wasn't just her imagination anymore. She didn't confront them. Not yet. Rachel needed proof. She needed clarity before setting fire to the life she'd built. But a war had begun inside her. Part of her wanted to be wrong, desperately. But the other part, wiser, wounded, already knew the truth was uglier than she could imagine. And the truth was coming for them all. The air in the house was heavier than ever. Rachel hadn't slept. She lay awake listening to the low creaks of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the hallway clock, as if the walls were holding their breath, waiting for what came next. It came the next morning. Marcus was in the shower, his phone on the nightstand buzzing softly. Rachel hadn't meant to look. She told herself she wouldn't. But when she saw D flash across the screen, her heart pounded so hard it felt like thunder in her chest. Her fingers moved faster than her mind. She unlocked it. She opened the messages. Her hands began to shake. Diane, last night was risky, but I can still feel you. Marcus, she's starting to notice. We need to be more careful. There were photos too. A hotel room. Diane in a silk robe. Marcus shirtless beside her. Rachel dropped the phone. The sound must have startled him, because Marcus called from the bathroom. Everything okay, babe? Rachel said nothing. Her vision blurred. Her throat burned. A scream built inside her like a wave against a dam. By the time Marcus stepped out, towel around his waist, Rachel was already downstairs, pacing the kitchen floor. The phone sat on the island, face up, like a smoking gun. Diane was pouring coffee at the counter, still in her robe, unaware that the clock on their secret had finally run out. Marcus entered, freezing when he saw Rachel's face. What's going on? Diane asked casually, glancing at Marcus. Rachel looked up, eyes wild and wet. You tell her, she hissed at him. Or I will. Marcus swallowed. Rachel, listen. Tell her. Rachel screamed, slamming her hands on the counter. Diane jumped, dropping her mug. It shattered. Rachel, calm down, Diane began, but Rachel was already pulling up the messages, shoving the phone toward her. Diane's face drained of color. She blinked, mouth open, words failing her. You slept with my husband, Rachel said, voice low and trembling. My husband. Your daughter's husband. I didn't mean. Don't you dare lie to me. Rachel roared. How long? Weeks? Months? While I was in this house. While I was planning our future. Marcus stepped forward. Rachel, please, we made a mistake. No, she whispered. You made a choice. Silence fell. Thick. Unbreathable. Then Diane reached out. Rachel, I never wanted to hurt you. Rachel shoved her back. Don't touch me. Tears streamed down her face. Her voice cracked. You were supposed to protect me. You're my mother. And then something broke, maybe inside Rachel, maybe in the air between them. Because in a flash, she grabbed a glass from a sink and hurled it across the kitchen. It shattered against the wall, pieces flying like shrapnel. Marcus stepped in front of Diane. Enough. But Rachel wasn't done. She pushed past them both, sobbing uncontrollably, her scream echoing down the hall. The dam had broken, and none of them would ever be the same again. The clock on the kitchen wall read 9:17 a.m. But time had stopped making sense. Rachel's screams had faded into sobs, raw and unrelenting. Marcus sat slumped at the kitchen table, face buried in his hands. Diane stood frozen, her back pressed against the fridge, pale and silent like a ghost who'd just seen her own grave. No one moved. No one spoke, until Marcus finally lifted his head and muttered, "We didn't mean for it to happen like this." Rachel spun around, eyes red and wild. "Like what? You didn't mean to sleep with my mother? Didn't mean to rip this family apart?" She laughed bitterly, hands trembling at her sides. "You meant all of it." Marcus stood, arms raised in defense. "Rachel, I swear I love you. I was confused." "Don't," she shrieked. "Don't pretend this was confusion. You planned it. Leet. Over and over again." Diane stepped forward. "Rachel, please. Just stop yelling and let's talk." "Shut up." Rachel snapped, pointing a shaking finger at her mother. "You have no right to talk. None." Diane's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to fall for him. I was lonely, lost. I never felt seen like I did when—" "Spare me the excuses," Rachel growled, voice shaking with rage. "You're disgusting." And then it happened. A blur of motion, a scream, a shatter. Marcus tried to grab Rachel, to calm her, stop the spiral, but his hand grazed her shoulder wrong, too forceful in the moment. Rachel stumbled back and collided with the counter. Her hand found the edge of a wooden cutting board, but her finger slipped, and instead, she grabbed the steel meat tenderizer. Diane lunged to stop her. "Rachel, no." But in the heat of betrayal, blinded by pain, Rachel turned and swung. The first blow connected with Diane's shoulder. The second, harder, caught her across the jaw. Diane screamed and fell backward, crashing against the kitchen floor with a sickening thud. Blood began to pool beneath her head. Marcus rushed to Diane, yelling her name over and over. "Diane! Diane, stay with me." Rachel dropped the weapon, staring at her blood-stained hands. Her breath caught in her throat. "Oh my God, what did I do?" Marcus looked up, panic in his eyes. "You killed her." "I didn't mean to. I didn't." Rachel stepped back, bumping into the counter, eyes locked on the spreading crimson beneath her mother's hair. Diane didn't move. Not an inch. The kitchen, once full of rage and screams, was now deathly silent. The clock ticked again. 9:28 a.m. Rachel fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, while Marcus scrambled to grab the house phone, only to stop mid-dial. His hands were shaking. His future had just shattered. A life had been taken. A line had been crossed. And there was no going back. Marcus's breath came in shallow gasps as he yanked open the bedroom closet. The duffel bag he kept for emergencies hadn't been touched in years, but now it was his lifeline. He stuffed it with cash, a passport, an old hoodie, and whatever else he thought he'd need to disappear. His hands shook as he zipped the bag shut. Downstairs, Rachel sat motionless on the kitchen floor, rocking slightly, whispering to herself. Diane's body was still there, silent, still, surrounded by a puddle of blood that now reached the edge of the fridge. Marcus couldn't even look at her anymore. He avoided Rachel's eyes, too. Everything about the house now felt cursed, like a pressure cooker seconds from exploding. As he grabbed his car keys from the kitchen counter, Rachel's voice stopped him cold. "You're leaving," she whispered, eyes glassy. "You're just gonna run?" "I have to," Marcus said flatly, avoiding her stare. "They'll think I did this." Rachel gave a dry laugh, almost maniacal. "You did this. You both did." He didn't answer. Seconds later, the front door slammed. Marcus jogged to the car, started the engine, and peeled out of the driveway, his duffel thrown into the passenger seat. He didn't care where he was going, just away. But he didn't even make it to the end of the block. Red and blue lights flared in his rearview mirror. 2 squad cars blocked the exit of a cul-de-sac, sirens silent but spinning like ghosts of justice. He hit the brakes, cursing under his breath. From across the street, old Mrs. Fenley, Rachel's nosy neighbor, stood on her porch, arms crossed, cell phone still clutched tightly in one hand. She had seen Marcus running from the house. She had seen Rachel screaming through the kitchen window. She had already told them everything. One of the officers stepped out of the cruiser, gun holstered but hand hovering near it. Marcus Delgado, step out of the vehicle with your hands visible. Marcus gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had planned to leave, maybe head to Dallas, disappear into a crowd, get out of the country if he had to. There was no fixing what had happened back in that kitchen, but freedom, at least, was the one thing he thought he could control. Now, even that was slipping away. He slowly opened the door, stepped out, hands raised in surrender. "I didn't kill her," he muttered, voice hollow. "I swear, I didn't." The officer didn't flinch. "Turn around. Hands on your head." Marcus complied, the weight of the moment crashing down like a tidal wave. Within seconds, cold steel snapped around his wrists. Another officer opened the back door of the squad car, pushing Marcus inside, without a word. As the door shut behind him, the last thing Marcus saw through the tinted glass was the house, the kitchen light still on, Rachel's silhouette barely visible through the curtain. It was over. The escape was done. Now all that remained were consequences. The moment was surreal. Flashing lights painted the neighborhood red and blue, washing over stucco walls and manicured lawns like a warning sign. Neighbors gathered behind yellow tape, clutching their robes and murmuring among themselves. Phones recorded. Reporters were already pulling up, mics in hand, like vultures circling fresh blood. Marcus knelt on the front lawn, hands cuffed tightly behind his back. His shirt was soaked in Diane's blood, some of it smeared down his arms, across his neck. A shallow cut ran down his cheek, courtesy of the scuffle in the kitchen, but he hardly felt it. His eyes were glazed, locked on a fixed point in the distance, unblinking, empty. Rachel stood just inside the front door, her face streaked with tears and mascara. Her voice cracked as she screamed at the officers, at Marcus, at the sky. "She was my mother. My mother. How could you? How could both of you?" No one answered her. An officer gently guided her back inside. Another wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. But the shaking didn't stop. Inside, Diane's body was being covered, tagged, and rolled onto a gurney. The woman who had once ruled every room she entered with elegance and confidence was now just another statistic, another victim of passion and betrayal. Outside, Marcus was shoved into the back of a squad car. Camera flashes exploded in his face. The headline was already writing itself. Husband's affair with wife's mother ends in grisly murder. By morning, every local news outlet in Texas, and several national ones, would have the story splashed across their homepages. Footage of Marcus's arrest would loop on every channel. His mugshot would become infamous. As he sat in the back of the cruiser, staring out at the chaos he had created, he remembered the first time he had met Diane, the way she looked at him, the way she made him feel seen, something Rachel never quite managed. He remembered their first kiss, the stolen moments, the guilt he swallowed with every "I love you" he whispered to both women. And he remembered the way it ended, the sharp, haunting sound of flesh meeting bone, the stillness afterward, the realization that nothing would ever be the same. By the following week, the Whitaker house was on the market. Rachel moved out and refused to give any interviews. Friends distanced themselves. The town, once charmed by Rachel and Marcus's storybook love, now spoke of them in hushed tones. The church that once praised Pastor Diane's grace now held candlelight vigils for her memory. Marcus sat in county jail awaiting trial, surrounded by cement walls and fluorescent lights, replaying the moment over and over in his head. The moment love turned into destruction. The truth had come out. The affair, the betrayal, the murder. But the cost? A family shattered, a future destroyed, and 3 lives ruined by one forbidden secret. In the heart of suburban America, behind closed doors and forced smiles, love twisted into lies, and lies ended in blood. If you found this true crime story gripping, Subscribe for more real, raw, and shocking tales from the darkest corners of human behavior.